My youngest son wrote in the group chat, "Don't come to the barbecue this weekend. My new wife said you're going to ruin the whole party." The rest of the family filled the chat with likes. I simply replied, "Understood." The next morning, when my son and his wife walked into my office and saw me, she screamed, "Why?" Let me tell you what really happened that Friday afternoon when my phone vibrated with a notification that shattered my soul into pieces. I was in my office reviewing the month's invoices. I am 68 years old, and I still wake up every morning to run my textile business as if I were 30. The walls of my office are lined with photographs. My 3 sons when they were children, my husband, Robert, before cancer took him 12 years ago, and that antique loom from my grandmother, who taught me that with your hands and sheer will, you can build an empire. The message appeared in the Vance family group chat. 32 people, 3 generations. My son Matthew, the youngest, the one who was always my baby, wrote without anesthesia, "Mom, better not come to the barbecue on Saturday. Vanessa says your presence is going to ruin the whole party. You know how she gets when things aren't the way she wants them." I felt the floor open up beneath my feet, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the little blue hearts that started appearing under the message. Richard, my eldest son, liked it. Stephen, the middle one, did too. And then their wives, and then my daughters-in-law, and then my own grandchildren. I counted every reaction as if I were counting stab wounds. 17 likes to the message that excluded me from my own family. I didn't cry. When you've built a company from scratch, when you've buried the love of your life and kept going, you learn that tears are saved for when no one is watching. I only wrote one word. Understood. If you want to know how a betrayed mother reclaims her dignity, subscribe to this channel. What comes next is going to surprise you. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my bedroom. The house was too quiet. Before, Fridays were for pancakes and coffee, with my sons arriving unannounced, the grandkids running down the hallway. Now, there was only an echo. Vanessa. That name repeated in my head like a song you can't stop hearing. She came into our lives 8 months ago like a hurricane. She met Matthew at a business convention in Chicago. She wrapped him up with her perfect smile and her ambition disguised as sweetness. They married within 3 months. I had a bad feeling from the beginning. But I stayed silent. Mothers always stay silent when we should scream. Matthew changed after he married her. My son, who used to call me every morning to ask how I had slept, started sending cold texts. My son, who came to brunch every Sunday without fail, started making excuses. Vanessa has a migraine. Vanessa needs me to go look at apartments with her. Vanessa, Vanessa, Vanessa. I built this textile business with my own 2 hands. I started by selling embroidered tablecloths at flea markets in Brooklyn. Today, I have 50 employees and invoice $200,000 a month. I paid for Matthew's college, for Richard's, for Stephen's. I bought their condos. I gifted them their first cars. When Robert died, it was I who kept this family afloat while they cried in my lap. And now, they were excluding me from a barbecue as if I were an uncomfortable stranger. Saturday morning, I got up early, brewed a pot of strong black coffee, and sat at the dining room table with my laptop. I wasn't going to beg them to love me, never that, but I wasn't going to stand by with my arms crossed watching them erase me from the history that I wrote myself. I opened my email and called Mr. Harrison, my trusted attorney for 20 years. "I need to see you Monday first thing. It's urgent." He didn't ask questions, just confirmed, 8 a.m. Then, I opened the safe I have hidden behind the painting of my great-grandmother. Inside are all the important documents. Deeds, wills, contracts. And also, something I had stored by intuition a month ago, when I started noticing Vanessa looking at my things with the eyes of an appraiser. I had hired a private investigator. Mothers have a sixth sense. Something about the way Vanessa asked about my properties, how she calculated the value of my house with her gaze, made me suspicious. The detective handed me a 40-page file. I read the whole thing that morning while my family celebrated without me. Vanessa Sterling, 29 years old, 2 previous marriages to wealthy, older men, 2 divorces with million-dollar lawsuits, accusations of domestic violence that she later withdrew in exchange for juicy settlements, a pattern so clear it was scary. My son knew nothing of this. He had married a professional gold digger, and I had the proof in my hands. But I decided not to do anything just yet. I put the file away. I called Mr. Harrison again. I want to modify my will and reorganize all my assets. I need to protect what I've built. Sunday passed slowly. None of my sons called to tell me how the barbecue was. None asked how I had spent the weekend. The silence hurt more than any insult, but something had changed in me. I was no longer the mother waiting for crumbs of affection. Now, I was a woman who knew exactly what she was worth. Monday at 8 a.m., I was signing documents in Mr. Harrison's office when I heard voices in the reception area. It was Matthew, and he was with Vanessa. "Is my mother here? We need to speak with her. It's urgent." The secretary showed them into my private office. I was sitting behind my mahogany desk, a pen in my hand and an open yellow folder in front of me. Matthew walked in smiling, oblivious to everything. But Vanessa saw the notary papers, the lawyer's seal, my serene expression, and she screamed. She understood before my own son did that the game was over. What did Vanessa see in those documents that made her scream? What comes next will leave you speechless. Vanessa's scream resonated off the wood-paneled walls of the office like the shriek of a cornered animal. It wasn't a scream of surprise. It was a scream of pure rage, of someone watching something they already considered theirs slip through their fingers. "What are you doing?" she asked, eyes wide, pointing at the documents on my desk. Matthew looked at her, confused, still not understanding anything. My son, my baby, standing there in his wrinkled linen shirt, with that lost puppy look he always had when something overwhelmed him. I didn't move a muscle. I let the silence settle between us like an uncomfortable guest. Then, with the calm that only comes from the certainty of doing the right thing, I closed the yellow folder and slid it toward the edge of the desk. "Sit down," I said. It wasn't an invitation. It was an order. Matthew obeyed immediately. Vanessa remained standing, arms crossed, her perfectly manicured red nails digging into her own elbows. I could see her jaw trembling. "Mom, we came to ask you a favor," Matthew began, trying to sound casual but with that shaky voice he used as a child when he broke something and tried to hide it. "Vanessa has an incredible business opportunity, a boutique for imported clothing in Soho. We just need $50,000 for the lease and initial inventory." I leaned back in my chair. $50,000. Just like that, like someone asking to borrow $20 for cab fare. $50,000, I repeated, letting the words float in the air. "And why didn't you ask me before excluding me from the family gathering on Saturday?" Matthew paled. Vanessa squeezed her arms tighter against her chest. That was a misunderstanding, Mom. Vanessa just thought that you were going to ruin her party." I finished the sentence for him. 17 people liked that message, Matthew. 17. Including your brothers. Including you. He lowered his gaze. Vanessa, on the other hand, lifted her chin with that arrogance I had begun to know too well. "It was just an intimate party, Eleanor. Nothing personal. Sometimes young couples need our space without the older generation observing every detail." Older generation. As if I were a relic of the past that needed to be shoved into a museum corner. I smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Let me tell you who this older generation is, Vanessa." I stood up and walked toward the window overlooking the city skyline. The 9 a.m. traffic flowed below like a river of metal and horns. 35 years ago, I was selling embroidered tablecloths at flea markets. My husband, Robert, worked 12 hours a day as an accountant at a firm that exploited him. We lived in a 400-square-foot apartment in Queens. I turned to look at them. Matthew knew this story, but he had never listened with the attention he was paying now. When Richard was born, I embroidered while I breastfed. When Stephen arrived, I had saved enough to buy 3 industrial sewing machines. And when you were born, Matthew, I already had a workshop with 8 employees. Robert kept working, but my income already surpassed his. I walked back to my desk and placed my hand on the yellow folder. "When your father got sick, I sold the car to pay for his treatment. I took out a loan, putting this business up as collateral, to pay for private hospital care because the standard care would have killed him faster. And when he died, when the 3 of you were devastated, crying at his funeral, it was I who opened the workshop at 6 a.m. the next day because we had orders to deliver and mouths to feed." My voice didn't tremble. Every word came out firm, like the strikes of a hammer on a nail. "I paid for Richard's private prep school. Stevens University. And yours, Matthew. Not only did I pay for your business degree at Wharton, I also bought you your condo in the West Village, the one you now share with Vanessa. Matthew opened his mouth, but no sound came out. That apartment, which is worth $1.5 million, I continued, is legally in my name. What I gave you was the use, not the ownership. Just like Richard's apartment on the Upper East Side and Stevens in Tribeca, just like the 3 cars I gave you boys, everything is registered as interest-free family loans. Vanessa stopped breathing for a second. I saw her doing the mental math, calculating how much money had just evaporated from her fantasies. Mom, I didn't know. Matthew started. I know, son, because you never bothered to ask, because you assumed everything you have fell from the sky. I sat down again and interlaced my hands on the desk. And now you come to ask me for $50,000 after making it clear that my presence is a nuisance in your life. The silence that followed was so dense you could cut it with a knife. Vanessa broke that silence with venom in her voice. And what does all this have to do with the papers you were signing? I opened the yellow folder. Inside were notarized documents with official seals and fresh signatures. I was reorganizing my will and my assets. Matthew leaned forward, panic painted on his face. What does that mean? It means that after what happened Friday, I understood that I need to protect what I have built over 40 years. This company, these properties, this patrimony, they cannot be in the hands of people who see me as a hindrance. Vanessa exploded. This is emotional manipulation. You are using money to control your son. I stood up so fast my chair rolled backward. I planted my hands on the desk and looked her straight in the eye. No, dear. Emotional manipulation is convincing a man that his mother is surplus in his life. Manipulation is isolating someone from their family and then coming with a hand extended asking for money. And the worst of it, Vanessa. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out another folder, this one thicker. The worst is believing I am stupid enough not to investigate you. I dropped the private investigator's file onto the table. The sound was like a thunderclap, 40 pages of truths that Matthew was completely unaware of. What is that? My son asked with a threat of a voice. It is your wife's past, the one she forgot to tell you about before marrying you. Vanessa took a step back. For the first time since I met her, I saw real fear in her eyes, and I knew that what came next was going to break my son into 1,000 pieces. But sometimes, the truth hurts less than living in a lie. What secrets was Vanessa hiding? Wait until you see what I found. Matthew took the file with trembling hands. I watched his eyes scan the first page, then the second. His face went from white to red, and then to an ashen gray that made me want to hug him like when he was a boy and fell off his bicycle. But he wasn't a boy anymore, and this wasn't a scraped knee. Vanessa Sterling, he read aloud, almost as if he didn't believe what he was seeing. First marriage. Robert Malone, 62 years old, owner of Malone Construction. Duration of marriage, 11 months. Divorce lawsuit for psychological violence. Out-of-court settlement, $120,000 plus a condo in Chicago. Matthew's voice broke. Vanessa tried to snatch the file from him, but he turned away, shielding it against his chest. Second marriage, he continued. And now his words came out choppy. Dr. Frederick Ames, 58 years old, plastic surgeon. Duration, 13 months. Lawsuit for harassment and threats. Settlement, $90,000 and a BMW. Matthew looked up at his wife. Tears shone in his eyes but didn't fall, as if his body refused to process what he had just discovered. Tell me this isn't true. Vanessa changed strategy in a second. Her face softened, her eyes filled with perfectly calculated tears, and she reached her hands toward him with that gesture of fragility she had surely perfected over years of practice. Baby, let me explain. Those men hurt me. I was a victim of abuse, of manipulation. I escaped those relationships because I feared for my life. The money. The money was the only thing I could recover after everything I suffered. I had seen enough soap operas in my life to recognize a mediocre performance. But Matthew, my poor, enamored son, wanted to believe. I saw his expression soften, his brain desperately searching for an explanation that made sense of all this, so I intervened. Page 17, I said with a firm voice. Read it all. Matthew turned the pages with clumsy fingers until he found the indicated page. What he read there tore away his last hope. Testimony of Patricia Ross, attorney for Mr. Malone. My client never exercised violence against Miss Sterling. The alleged evidence presented consisted of text messages taken out of context and edited recordings. We agreed to the financial settlement on legal recommendation to avoid a media scandal that could affect the construction firm's reputation. Matthew continued reading in silence. I knew what was coming because I had memorized that damn file. Testimonies from domestic staff describing Vanessa picking fights, recording them in secret, manipulating situations to later present herself as a victim. Invoices for an online course on legal strategies in divorces that she had taken 6 months before meeting each of her husbands. Bank transfers showing a pattern, gain access to accounts, make excessive purchases, generate conflict, and then sue. She was a professional, a predator with a college degree and a perfect manicure. Matthew, those are all lies from bitter men who couldn't stand a woman leaving them. Vanessa tried, but her voice no longer sounded convincing. It sounded desperate. My son dropped the file onto the desk. He stood staring into the void, processing how the last 8 months of his life had been a carefully constructed lie. You told me you had never been married, he whispered. You swore I was your first great love. Baby, listen to me. You lied to me! He finally exploded. Matthew stood up so abruptly his chair fell backward. From day one, you lied to me. What else? What else of what you've told me is a lie? I remained silent. It wasn't my moment to speak. It was Matthew's moment to wake up. Vanessa tried to touch him, but he recoiled as if she burned. Then I saw her mask change again. The tears dried up, the sweet voice disappeared, and what remained was something cold, calculating, real. Fine, she said with a bitter laugh. You want the truth, Matthew? Yes. I was married before. Yes. I got money from those marriages. And you know what? Those men could afford it. Just like you. Just like your family. I felt my blood run cold. Since I met you, I knew exactly who you were, she continued. The youngest son of a successful businesswoman. The spoiled one. The one who would inherit a fortune. Your mother has properties, a business, investments, and you, being a good, obedient son, were going to share all of that with me. Matthew stepped back as if slapped. You fell in love so fast, Vanessa continued with cruelty. It was so easy. 3 months of attention, of telling you how special you were, of making you feel like the most important man in the world, and you married me without even investigating who I was. Vanessa, shut up, I warned her. But she was unleashed. She knew everything was lost and decided to burn the ships. And you know what was the best part? That I managed to get you to push your family away, especially her. She pointed at me with contempt. Because I knew your mother was the only one with enough brains to figure me out. That's why I painted her as the controlling mother-in-law, the meddling old woman who couldn't let go of her little boy. Matthew put his hands to his head. I could see his world crumbling with every word. I convinced Richard and Stephen that your mom favored you. I planted ideas in their heads through their wives. I created that parallel WhatsApp group where we all talked about how heavy Eleanor was, how she controlled you all with her money. And it worked. It worked so well that on Friday, everyone liked my exclusion message. She walked up to Matthew and spoke directly into his face. I was going to wait 2 more years. 2 years for your mother to put everything in your name, to inherit more for us. And then I would have left you just like the other 2 with a nice lawsuit, a nice settlement, and on to look for the next one. The silence that followed was brutal. Matthew was trembling from head to toe. I stood firm behind my desk, though inside I wanted to tear that woman apart with my own hands. Get out, I said finally. My voice sounded like ice. Get out of my office right now, or I'm calling security. Vanessa looked at me with pure hatred. Then she looked at Matthew, who couldn't even hold her gaze. This doesn't end here, she threatened. I'm going to sue. I have rights as a wife. Sue for whatever you want, I replied. But you will be facing the best legal team money can buy. And I assure you, when I'm done with you, not only will you not see a dime, but all your future targets will know exactly who you are. She turned with a scream of frustration and left, slamming the door so hard it made the frames of the photographs on the wall shake. Matthew collapsed into the chair, hid his face in his hands, and finally wept. He cried like I hadn't seen him cry since his father's funeral. I walked around the desk and hugged him, letting him wet my blouse with his tears while I stroked his hair like when he was 5 years old and had nightmares. "I'm sorry, Mom," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I know, son, I know. But forgiveness would have to wait because this was just beginning." What Matthew didn't know is that Vanessa had done something else, something that could have cost me everything. And when I discovered it, Matthew stayed in my office for 2 hours. 2 hours where we didn't talk much, just existed there, mother and son, processing the magnitude of the deception. I made him a strong coffee that my secretary brought with cinnamon cookies, but he barely touched it. He had a 1,000-yard stare fixed on the wall, as if watching a movie of his life and discovering it had all been fiction. "How did I not notice?" he asked finally, voice hoarse from crying. "How was I such an idiot?" I sat beside him and took his hand in mine. His palms were cold, clammy. Love doesn't blind, Matthew. People like Vanessa know exactly how to take advantage of that. They are experts at finding our weak points and attacking them. He shook his head, furious with himself. "But the worst part isn't just what she did to me, Mom. It's what I did to you guys. To you, to Richard, to Stephen." He turned to look at me with red-rimmed eyes. "That message on Friday. I liked it. I approved of you being excluded from your own family." The wound was still fresh. I wasn't going to lie to him and say it didn't hurt. "Yes, you did." "How did all this start?" he asked, more to himself than to me. "At what moment did I let that woman convince me to push you away?" And there was the question I had asked myself 1,000 times in recent weeks. Because Vanessa's manipulation wasn't a sudden event, it was a slow, meticulous process, like rust eating away at metal drop by drop. "It started almost immediately after the wedding," I told him. "Do you remember that Sunday you came over for lunch? I had prepared your favorite pot roast, the one that takes 2 days to marinate." Vanessa sat at the table and barely took a bite. She said the roast seemed too heavy for her diet, but she said it in a way that sounded like I was trying to poison her. "And you, love, you defended her. You said I should be more considerate of her dietary preferences." I saw Matthew close his eyes, remembering. "Then there was the issue of the keys," I continued. "For 30 years, my 3 sons had a key to this house. You came in whenever you wanted. It was your home as much as mine. But Vanessa told you that was invasive, that a married couple needed privacy from the in-laws, and you gave me back your key." "My God," he murmured. "And there was the group chat. Vanessa created a parallel one, right? One where I wasn't included. That's where she started planting her seeds of poison." Matthew looked up abruptly. "How do you know that?" I sighed. This was the moment to confess something I had discovered that had broken my heart into even smaller pieces. "Because Grace, your brother Stephen's wife, came to see me 3 weeks ago." Surprise painted Matthew's face. Grace had always been the noblest of my daughters-in-law, the one who had been in the family longest, mother of my 2 eldest grandkids. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon without warning. She sat in my living room and started crying. She told me she had to tell me something because she couldn't handle the guilt anymore. I stood up and walked to the window. The afternoon traffic was starting to congest. The city in all its chaos, its beauty, its daily brutality. Vanessa created a group called the Vance Wives. It was her, Grace, and Diane, Richard's wife. That's where Vanessa started sowing discord. Daily messages about how I was controlling, about how I manipulated my sons with money, about how I prevented you all from being independent. Matthew stood up, incredulous. "She invented entire stories," I continued. "She told Grace that I had criticized her way of raising the children. She told Diane that I commented she had gained weight. Lies. Perfectly designed lies to create resentment. And they believed her? At first, no. But Vanessa was smart. She mixed lies with half-truths. For example, she'd say, "Eleanor asked me how much the kids' private school tuition is," which was true because I always ask about my grandkids. But then she'd add, "I think she wants to use that to criticize that you spend too much." And so, little by little, she poisoned the perception your brothers and their wives had of me. I walked back toward Matthew and showed him my phone. I had screenshots Grace had sent me, feeling the guilt of having participated in that. Matthew read message after message. Vanessa spoke of me as if I were a villain from a movie. She said I spied on their social media to judge them, that I commented negatively on their lives, that I compared my sons to create rivalries. Each accusation was more absurd than the last, but repeated enough times, they began to leave a mark. "That's why Richard stopped calling me," Matthew murmured, connecting the dots. Vanessa told him that you complained he never visited you, when that wasn't true. Exactly. And that's why Stephen started acting cold toward me. Vanessa invented that I had said Grace wasn't good enough for him. Matthew's phone rang. It was a message from Richard in the family group. Matt, are you okay? Vanessa just posted on social media that Mom kicked you guys out of her office and threatened you legally. What is happening? Matthew looked at the screen and let out a bitter laugh. Even to the end, she keeps manipulating. He took his phone and started typing, not in the family group, but in a new one he created right then. Brothers, we need to talk. All three of us. Urgent. It's about Vanessa. And about Mom. And about how we let ourselves be fooled. The responses came almost immediately. Richard, I'm on my way. Stephen, where are you guys? An hour later, my 3 sons were sitting in the conference room of my company. Richard arrived straight from his architecture firm, blueprints still rolled up under his arm. Stephen came from his office in the financial district, loosening his tie as soon as he entered. The 3 looked at each other with a mix of confusion and concern. I remained standing in front of them, as I had so many times during business meetings. But this wasn't business. This was family. My family, the one I had built with love, sacrifice, and 40 years of tireless work. Thank you for coming, I began. I know you have questions. I know Vanessa must already be telling her version of events on social media, in your chat groups, wherever she can get her narrative out first. Richard leaned forward with that serious expression he inherited from his father. Mom, what is happening? Vanessa's post says you accused her of being a gold digger, that you threatened to disinherit Matt. Everything she says is a lie, Matthew interrupted. His voice sounded firm, no longer broken. Or worse than a lie, they are twisted half-truths to make her look like the victim. And then, my youngest son did something I didn't expect. He took the private investigator's file and slid it to his brothers. Read this, read the whole thing, and then we'll talk. For the next 40 minutes, the only sound in that room was the turning of pages and occasional stifled exclamations of disbelief. I saw Richard pale as he read about the previous marriages. I saw Stephen clench his jaw when he reached the part about the fraudulent lawsuits. When they finished, Stephen was the first to speak. All this time, I confirmed. Vanessa was executing a plan, and I was foolish enough not to stop it sooner. You weren't foolish, Mom, Richard said, voice tense. We were. Us. We believed her. We liked that damn message on Friday. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with guilt and regret. But what none of them knew yet was that Vanessa hadn't just manipulated their emotions. She had attempted something much worse, something I discovered by accident a week prior and had saved as my final card. And I was about to reveal it. There is something else you need to know, I said, breaking the tense silence of the conference room. I walked to the filing cabinet and took out a navy blue folder I had kept under lock and key. Something I discovered exactly a week ago and haven't told anyone, not even Matthew. The 3 looked at me with a mix of fear and curiosity. I placed the folder on the mahogany table with a sharp thud that resonated like a gunshot. The company accountant, Mr. Foster, came to see me last Tuesday. He was nervous, sweating, stuttering. He told me he had detected an irregularity in the banking movements of the last 2 months. I opened the folder and took out the bank statements marked with fluorescent yellow highlighter. Someone tried to make a wire transfer of $20,000 from the company's operating account to an external account. The transfer was rejected by the bank because it required double authentication and my digital signature. Matthew turned as pale as wax. No, it can't be. Mr. Foster checked the system access logs. The transfer order was made from your computer, Matthew, from your home office, a Wednesday at 3 p.m., when you were here with me reviewing contracts with the fabric supplier. The silence was so absolute I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Vanessa had access to your computer, I continued. She had your passwords, and she used that information to try to steal from this company. From your family? Richard let out a curse between his teeth. Stephen put his hands to his head. Matthew simply stared at the documents as if they were a death sentence. The destination account, I added, sliding another paper across the table, is registered in the name of a certain Monica Sterling, Vanessa's sister, who supposedly lives in Dallas and with whom she claims to have a distant relationship. So she had it all planned, Stephen muttered. Everything from the beginning. That's why she came to ask me for the $50,000 this morning, Matthew said with a hollow voice. Because the theft attempt failed. She needed the money another way. I put the documents back in the blue folder. I filed a formal complaint with the FBI and the district attorney. There is an open investigation. If they find enough evidence, Vanessa could face charges for wire fraud and attempted embezzlement. Good, Richard said fiercely. Let her rot in jail. But I shook my head. It's not that simple. Vanessa is smart. She can claim Matthew gave her access to his computer, that she thought she had authorization, that it was a misunderstanding. She has experience coming out clean from complicated legal situations. Her 2 ex-husbands can attest to that. I finally sat in my chair, suddenly feeling all the weight of my 68 years on my shoulders. That's why I called you today, because I need you to understand the magnitude of what happened. It wasn't just a manipulative woman who married Matthew. It was a calculated operation to infiltration this family, divide us, and eventually loot us. I looked at each of my sons with the firmness only a mother can have, and she almost succeeded. Because you 3, my sons, the men I raised to be strong, supportive, united, you liked a message that excluded me from a family gathering. Do you know how that felt? Richard lowered his gaze. Stephen bit his lip. Matthew had tears running down his cheeks again. It felt as if everything I built had served for nothing. As if the 35 years I spent building this business, paying for your schools, your apartments, your lives, had been erased with a simple like button. My voice broke at the end. I couldn't help it. All the rage, the pain, the accumulated disappointment came out in those words. Mom, Richard began, but I raised my hand to stop him. Let me finish. That barbecue on Saturday, that party I wasn't invited to, wasn't just a social event. It was the culmination of months of manipulation. Vanessa convinced your wives that I was the problem. The wives convinced you. And you, my sons, decided it was easier to exclude your mother than to confront your partners. I tried to defend you, Stephen murmured. I told Grace I thought it was wrong, but she what? I interrupted. She convinced you with the arguments Vanessa put in her head, or was it simply more comfortable to give in? Stephen didn't answer. There was no possible answer. Do you know what I did that Saturday? I asked, changing the subject. I woke up early. I got ready as if I were going out. I put on makeup. I wore my burgundy linen dress, the one Robert gave me for our 20th anniversary. I did my hair. I put on perfume. The 3 looked at me, confused by the change in direction. And then I sat in the living room, alone, for 6 hours looking at the photographs on the walls. You as babies. You at your graduations. Robert holding Richard the day he was born. The photo of everyone in the Hamptons when Stephen turned 10. Matthew with his first award from school. I wiped away a tear that escaped without permission and I waited. I waited for one of you to change your mind. For one of you to call and say, Mom, this is wrong. Come to the barbecue. But my phone never rang. Mom, I'm so sorry, Matthew sobbed. I don't know how I could. At 8 p.m., I continued, ignoring his interruption. I changed my clothes, put on my pajamas, made myself a chamomile tea, and made a decision. I opened my desk drawer and took out another document. This was the modified will I had mentioned that morning. I decided that if my family could exclude me with such ease, then I needed to protect what I had built. Not out of revenge, not out of resentment, but out of self-respect. I placed the document on the table so everyone could see it. This is my new will. It was notarized Friday afternoon, 4 hours before I received that message in the family group, because I already knew something bad was coming. A mother always knows. Richard took the document with trembling hands and began to read. I saw his eyes widen. It says that everything goes to a foundation, the Robert Vance Foundation for Textile Education. Confirmed, I said. Scholarships for underprivileged youth who want to study design, business administration, or any career related to the industry. The entire estate, the company, the properties, the investments, everything. Mom, you can't. Stephen started, but I cut him off with a look. I can, and I did. The apartments where you live are legally registered as interest-free family loans. At the moment of my death, those loans become due. You will have 90 days to buy the properties at market price or vacate them. The shock on their faces was absolute. Matthew looked on the verge of collapse. But this doesn't have to be definitive, I added, softening my tone slightly. This can be modified. But it won't be modified by pleading or tears. It will be modified when you demonstrate to me that you understand the value of family, of respect, of loyalty. I stood up and walked to the window. The sunset painted the sky orange and purple, beautiful and melancholic at the same time. Vanessa manipulated you. That is true, but you let yourselves be manipulated, and there is a difference. She is the villain of this story, but you are not innocent victims. You are grown men who made decisions that hurt me deeply. I turned to face them one last time. So now comes the hard part. Matthew has to divorce and face the legal consequences of having married a con artist. Richard and Stephen have to go home and explain to their wives how they allowed themselves to be poisoned by a manipulator's gossip. And the three of you have to decide what kind of sons, what kind of men you want to be from now on. I walked toward the door of the conference room and opened it. Now leave, all of you. Process this. And when you are ready for a real conversation, one where you take full responsibility for your actions, you call me. Mom. Richard tried. Leave, I repeated firmly. One by one, they left. Matthew was the last. He stopped in the doorway and looked at me with destroyed eyes. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at him for a long moment. Forgiveness isn't something that is given automatically, son. It is something that is earned day by day, with actions, not words. He nodded and left. I stayed alone in that conference room, surrounded by documents that proved betrayal, manipulation, and the fracture of my family, and for the first time in many years, I allowed myself to cry. But they were different tears than before. They weren't tears of defeat. They were tears of liberation, because finally, I had recovered something I had lost without realizing it, my dignity. But Vanessa wasn't going to give up that easily. What she did next forced me to show what I'm really made of. 4 days of absolute silence passed. 4 days in which my phone remained mute, no messages from my sons, no calls, no signs of life. I kept my routine. I arrived at the company at 7 a.m., reviewed orders, supervised production, attended to clients as if nothing had happened, as if my world hadn't split in two. But the nights were different. At night, I sat in the dining room of my house, that enormous dining room with capacity for 12 people that now only harbored me. And I asked myself if I had done the right thing, if I had been too harsh, if I should call them first. Then I remembered that like on the exclusion message, and the doubt vanished. Thursday morning, my secretary knocked on my office door with a worried expression. Mrs. Vance, there is a person insisting on seeing you. She doesn't have an appointment. I told her she needed to schedule one, but she refused to leave. She says it's urgent. Who is it? I asked without looking up from the contracts I was reviewing. Vanessa Sterling. The pen slipped from my fingers. I looked up slowly and looked at my secretary, trying to confirm I had heard correctly. Vanessa is here? In the waiting room? She's been there for 40 minutes. She says she won't leave until she talks to you. I felt the adrenaline start to run through my veins. After everything that had happened, after having been unmasked, that woman had the nerve to show up at my company. Send her in, I said finally, and stay close. If you hear yelling, call security. My secretary nodded and left. I used those seconds to compose myself. I adjusted the amber necklace that had belonged to my grandmother, the one I wear when I need to remember where I come from and what I am made of. I breathed deeply 3 times and prepared for war. Vanessa entered with a firm step, head held high, dressed in a black power suit that probably cost more than my employees earn in 2 months. But there was something different about her. The dark circles under the makeup, the nails that were previously perfect, now bitten at the corners, the heels that didn't match the purse. She was unraveling. Eleanor, she said, and her voice sounded forcedly kind. Thank you for seeing me. I didn't receive you out of courtesy, I replied without inviting her to sit. I received you out of curiosity. After everything that happened, what the hell are you doing here? She swallowed hard. For a moment I saw a flash of the real Vanessa, vulnerable, scared, but she composed herself quickly. I came to talk woman to woman. No lawyers, no Matthew, no one else. What could you and I possibly talk about? A deal. I couldn't help letting out a bitter laugh. A deal? You, the one who tried to steal from my company, who manipulated my entire family, who almost destroyed my relationship with my sons, you want to negotiate? Vanessa clutched her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. Look, I know I made mistakes. I know things got out of control. But it doesn't have to end like this. We can reach an arrangement that benefits us both. Enlighten me, I said, crossing my arms. What possible benefit could I obtain from reaching an agreement with you? She sat down without my invitation, dropping her purse onto the leather armchair beside her. I go away. I disappear from Matthew's life, from your life, from the life of the entire Vance family. I sign the divorce without asking for alimony, without making a scandal, without lawsuits. I leave quietly. And in exchange, $2 million. The figure floated in the air like a slap. $2 million. The price this woman put on her silence. I sat slowly in my chair, studying her carefully. It was fascinating to see how her brain operated. Even in defeat, even discovered, she kept looking for ways to extract money from the situation. $2 million, I repeated slowly. And if I refuse? Vanessa's eyes hardened. Then this gets ugly, very ugly. I can go to the media and tell my version of the story. The rich businesswoman who abuses her power to destroy her son's wife because she doesn't consider her good enough. I can make your reputation, your company, everything you've built go down the drain. I see, I said, with a calm I didn't feel. So, you call it negotiation. I call it blackmail. I got up from my chair and walked toward the small bar I have in my office. I poured myself a glass of water, taking my time, forcing her to wait. Every second of silence increased the tension. Let me tell you a story, Vanessa, I began finally, without turning to look at her. 35 years ago, when I started this business, a supplier tried to scam me. He sold me low-quality fabric, passing it off as premium material. I was new, inexperienced. He thought he could fool me easily. I turned and looked her straight in the eye. Do you know what I did? I sued him. I spent money I didn't have on lawyers. I spent nights without sleeping, preparing the case, and I won. Not only did I recover my money, but I made sure the entire textile guild knew who that man was. He never worked in the industry again. I walked slowly toward her, letting each step resonate on the wooden floor, because I learned something very important that day. When you give in to blackmail, when you pay for silence, you are only teaching the blackmailer that it works, and they will come back again and again and again. I stopped in front of her. So no, Vanessa, I'm not going to give you a single dollar. Her face transformed. The mask of professionalism collapsed, and what remained was pure fury. You're going to regret this. I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to go to every newspaper, every TV show. I'm going to tell how you abuse your employees, how you mistreat your family, how what? I interrupted her. How I protected my assets from a professional con artist? How I discovered that you tried to steal $20,000 from my company? Because I have proof of all that, Vanessa. Documents, logs, testimonies. I took out my phone and showed her the screen. It was an email from Mr. Harrison. My lawyer has already prepared a preemptive defamation lawsuit. If you tell a single lie about me or my family in any medium, we are going to sue you for every penny you have. And since I know you have plenty stashed away from your previous marriages, believe me, it's going to hurt. Vanessa stood up abruptly. You're a witch! A bitter old woman who can't stand seeing her son happy. No, I corrected with a voice of steel. I am a mother who protects her family from predators like you. And I am a businesswoman who does not let herself be intimidated by empty threats. I walked to the door and opened it wide. Now get out of my office. And if I see you near me, my children, or my company again, the lawsuit for attempted wire fraud goes straight to the district attorney. Understood? Vanessa looked at me with so much hate that for a moment I thought she was going to physically attack me. Her hands were trembling, her breathing was agitated, her whole body vibrated with contained rage. This isn't over, she hissed between her teeth. Yes, it is, I replied, here and now, because I'm going to tell you something that maybe no one has told you before. I was poor too. I also fought to get ahead. The difference between you and me is that I built my wealth with honest work. You only learned to steal from men who made the mistake of falling in love with you. Something in my words hit her harder than any insult. I saw her face contract, her lower lip start to tremble. For a second, just a second, I saw the real woman behind all the manipulation, someone who was alone, scared, and who had chosen the wrong path a long time ago. But that second passed. The mask went back into place. "I'm leaving," she said finally. "But Matthew is going to suffer. I'm going to make him pay for all this." "No," I told her firmly. "Matthew has already paid enough for the mistake of loving you. Now he is going to heal, and he is going to learn, and he is going to be stronger." Vanessa left, slamming the door so hard it made the frame vibrate. I stood there, heart beating 1,000 miles an hour, hands shaking from the adrenaline dump. My secretary appeared in the doorway, eyes wide as saucers. "Are you okay, Mrs. Vance?" "I am perfectly fine," I replied, though my legs felt like jelly. "Could you bring me a lime tea? And call Mr. Harrison. I need him to reinforce all the legal protection measures we discussed." She nodded and disappeared. I went back to my desk and let myself fall into the chair. The confrontation had been exhausting, but necessary, because Vanessa needed to understand that I wasn't one of her previous victims. I wasn't an older man in love who was going to give in to blackmail for fear of scandal. I was a woman who had built an empire from zero and wasn't going to allow anyone to destroy it. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Matthew. "Mom, Vanessa just got to the apartment. She's packing her things. She's furious." "What happened?" My fingers moved over the keyboard. "She came to blackmail me. She left empty-handed. Change the locks today and do not open the door for her ever again." His response came immediately. "Already called the locksmith." "Mom, thank you for protecting me." I put the phone away and looked out the window. The midday sun shone over the city, relentless and beautiful. I had won this battle. But something told me the war wasn't over yet. And I was right, because 3 days later, when I thought it was all over, I received a call that changed everything again. The call came Sunday at 9 p.m. I was in my living room watching an old movie, one of those black and white classics Robert adored, when the phone lit up the gloom. Unknown number. I hesitated to answer, but something that mother's intuition that never fails made me slide my finger across the screen. "Mrs. Vance?" It was a young woman's voice, nervous. "Who is speaking?" "My name is Felicity Ames. I am the daughter of Dr. Frederick Ames, Vanessa Sterling's second husband." My blood ran cold. I sat up straight on the sofa, all senses on alert. "How did you get my number?" I looked up information on the Vance family online after seeing the post Vanessa published on social media accusing you of abuse, and I needed to warn you. "Warn me about what?" There was a pause. I heard her take a deep breath on the other end of the line, gathering courage. "That Vanessa isn't going to stop. She never stops. What she did to my father, what she is doing to your son, is exactly the same thing she has done before, and she is going to keep going until she destroys you or gets what she wants." I got up and walked to the window. The street was dark, silent, illuminated only by flickering street lamps. "Tell me," I said simply. And Felicity spoke for 40 minutes without stopping. She told me how Vanessa met her father at a medical conference, how she seduced him with constant attention, how they married within 4 months. She told me about the accusations of violence that never existed, about the recordings edited to make it seem like the doctor was yelling when really he was just defending himself from verbal attacks. She isolated my dad from his friends, from his colleagues, from his own daughter, Felicity said, voice breaking. My dad was a strong man, a successful surgeon, respected, but when she was done with him, he was destroyed. Not just financially, emotionally. He stopped operating for 6 months. He fell into a depression. I had to commit him to a psychiatric clinic. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of those words. After the divorce, I found a diary she had left forgotten in the house. Everything was written there, how she planned every fight, how she provoked reactions to record them, how she calculated how much time she needed to be married to maximize the settlement. It was like reading the operations manual of a professional con artist. "Do you still have that diary?" I asked, my brain already processing the legal implications. "Yes, and I can send it to you. But I'm calling for another, more urgent reason." Her voice became tenser. "Mrs. Vance, my father tried to commit suicide 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. He took a whole bottle of pills. I found him in time, but he was in intensive care for 5 days. I felt my legs go weak. I leaned against the wall. Vanessa had threatened him. She told him that if he didn't give her what she asked for, she was going to invent that he had sexually abused her. That she would go to the media, destroy his medical reputation, ensure he could never operate again. My dad preferred to die rather than face those lies. My God, I whispered. That's why I'm calling you. Because I saw Vanessa's post about you. I saw the veiled threats, the victim's speech, and I recognized the pattern. She is preparing the ground to extort you again, but this time publicly. She's going to paint a story where she is the mistreated daughter-in-law and you are the abusive mother-in-law, and people are going to believe her because she is very good at acting. My mind worked at full speed, connecting dots, anticipating moves. Your father, would he be willing to testify? To tell his story? Felicity sighed. He is better now. He remarried a wonderful woman, but he still has nightmares. I don't know if he has the strength to relive all that in a trial. I understand. And you? I would testify. I have the diary. I have emails. I have text messages. I have proof of everything. I made a decision in that moment. One that would change the course of everything that came after. Felicity, I need you to come to the city. Tomorrow, if possible. Bring everything you have. Every document. Every proof. We are going to stop Vanessa before she destroys anyone else. Really? Her voice filled with hope. You're really going to confront her? Not only am I going to confront her, I'm going to make sure the whole world knows who she really is. No more victims, no more destroyed families. We hung up after coordinating the details. I stood by the window for a long time, watching the night, processing everything. The next day, Felicity arrived at my office at 10 a.m. She was a 30-year-old woman, thin, with dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights and a fierce determination in her gaze. She brought a cardboard box full of documents. "This is everything," she said, placing it on my desk. 5 years of evidence of who Vanessa Sterling really is. We spent the next 4 hours reviewing every paper. The diary was disturbing lines written in small, neat handwriting, detailing every manipulation as if they were accounting entries. Provoke jealousy, mentioning young, successful patient. Record discussion about finances. Edit to remove context. Threaten with public accusations. Increase pressure. It was chilling to see Vanessa's mind functioning on paper. But there was more. Emails with her sister Monica discussing legal strategies. Messages with a friend where she mocked the old fool who had fallen into her trap. Photographs of Vanessa in expensive restaurants while pretending to Dr. Ames that she was homesick. My father gave her $5,000 a month for personal expenses, Felicity explained, pointing to bank statements. She spent double that and then accused him of being cheap, of not valuing her. I called Mr. Harrison. He arrived in 30 minutes with his legal assistant. They reviewed all the material while Felicity and I drank coffee that went cold without us touching it. "This is legal gold," the lawyer finally said. "With this, we can not only defend Matthew in the divorce, but countersue for marriage fraud. And if Vanessa makes any false accusation public, we have grounds for a defamation lawsuit with punitive damages that will leave her in ruins." "I want more than that," I said firmly. "I want this to reach all her future targets. I want it so that when someone searches her name on the internet, this is the first thing they find." Felicity looked at me with gratitude mixed with something that looked like satisfied vengeance. "My father never wanted to do this. He said it was better to turn the page, to forget. But I could never forget seeing him in that hospital bed with tubes in his arms because she had driven him to that point." I took her hand across the table. "She's not going to hurt anyone else. I promise you." That afternoon, Mr. Harrison drafted a legal document that was basically a bomb, a complete dossier of Vanessa Sterling's history, backed by irrefutable evidence, verifiable testimonies, and a pattern of criminal behavior that no judge could ignore. But before presenting it officially, I did something else. I called my 3 sons and asked them to come to my house that night. All 3. No excuses. Because it was time they knew the whole truth. And it was time they made a decision about what kind of family we wanted to be. I prepared coffee and pastries, just like I did when my sons were small and came to tell me their school problems. I placed the croissants and danishes on the ceramic platter Robert gave me for our first anniversary. My hands trembled slightly as I arranged the mugs on the dining table. Richard arrived first, punctual as always, still in his work clothes. Stephen appeared 10 minutes later, loosening his tie as soon as he entered. Matthew was the last, with deep dark circles and a 3-day beard he had never let grow before. The 3 sat in silence, watching me with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Thank you for coming," I began, pouring coffee for each of them. I know these have been difficult days. Mom, Vanessa left the apartment, Matthew said without touching his mug. She packed everything in 2 hours and disappeared. She won't answer my calls. Her social media is full of posts about family abuse and toxic mothers-in-law, but she doesn't mention me directly. I know. I've been monitoring her accounts. I took a seat at the head of the table, in the spot Robert always occupied. But there is something you need to know. Something that changes the entire perspective of what we lived through. I placed the cardboard box Felicity had left me on the table. The three looked at it as if it were a bomb about to explode. Yesterday, I received a call from the daughter of Vanessa's second husband, Dr. Frederick Ames, a plastic surgeon in Chicago. I paused, letting the information settle. That woman came all the way here to warn me. And to give me this, I took out Vanessa's diary and placed it on the table. The cover was black leather, elegant, expensive like everything Vanessa chose. This is Vanessa's personal diary. She forgot it at Dr. Ames's house when she left. Here is documented every step of her plan to manipulate him, extort him, and finally destroy him. Richard reached out and took the diary cautiously, as if touching something contaminated. He began to read aloud, his voice increasingly tense with every line. Day 42. Frederick mentioned that his daughter Felicity is going to inherit the clinic. Need to sow doubts about her capability. Suggest she is manipulating him. Create distance between them to have full access to finances. Stephen leaned in to read over his brother's shoulder, his face paling. Day 87. Provoke fight about his work hours. Record only my part crying. Edit to make it seem like he's yelling at me. These recordings will be useful in the divorce. Matthew didn't move. He simply stared at the diary with an expression of absolute horror. Keep reading, I said softly but firmly. Richard turned several pages and stopped at an entry that made his hand tremble visibly. Day 120. Threatened to accuse him publicly of sexual abuse if he doesn't accept my terms. Saw the fear in his eyes. He knows an accusation like that, even false, would destroy his career. Doctors don't survive scandals. I have all the power now. The silence that followed was so dense it could be felt physically. Richard slammed the diary shut and pushed it toward the center of the table as if it burned. That man tried to commit suicide 3 weeks after the divorce, I continued. He took a whole bottle of pills. His daughter found him in time, but he was in intensive care for 5 days. Matthew let out a choked sound, something between a sob and a groan. He put his hands to his face. I was going to marry that. I was married to that. Yes, I confirmed. And if I hadn't investigated her, if I hadn't acted when I did, you would probably be in the same position as Dr. Ames. In 1 or 2 years. I took more documents out of the box. The bank statements, the emails with Monica planning strategies, the screenshots of messages where she mocked her victims. Her first husband, Mr. Malone, lost million-dollar contracts because she leaked confidential information to the competition during their marriage. It took him 3 years to recover financially. I placed photographs on the table. Vanessa in luxury restaurants with other men while she was married, credit card receipts with excessive purchases, documents of properties she tried to transfer to her name without authorization. But that's not all, I said, taking out the last document. Felicity found this in her father's files. A report from a private investigator that Mr. Malone hired after the divorce. Richard took the document and began to read. His eyes opened wide. It says here that Vanessa has a bank account in the Cayman Islands with over $150,000, money she accumulated from her 2 previous marriages and hid during the legal proceedings. Exactly. While she cried poverty to the judges, she had a fortune stashed away offshore. Stephen finally spoke, his voice loaded with contained anger. And what are we going to do with all this information? I leaned back in the chair, looking at my 3 sons with the seriousness only a mother can have. That decision isn't just mine, it's all of ours, especially Matthew's. My youngest son looked up. His eyes were red, swollen, but for the first time in days, I saw something more than despair in them. I saw determination. I want her to pay, he said with a trembling but firm voice. Not just for what she did to me, for what she did to that family in Chicago, for Mr. Malone, for everyone who comes after, if we don't stop her. That means a public trial. I warned. It means your name is going to be on legal documents, in the media, on the internet. People are going to talk. Let them talk, Matthew replied, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. I prefer they speak the truth than to live with the lie. Richard nodded with approval. I'm with you, brother. And Mom. We also need to pay for what we did to you. We let that woman poison us against you. We let ourselves be manipulated like idiots, Stephen added. We believed every lie. We excluded you from the family. We liked that damn message. I looked at the three of them. My sons. The men I had raised, seen grow, loved unconditionally even when they hurt me. Forgiveness doesn't arrive in a day, I said finally. But this is a beginning. Seeing us united against someone who wanted to destroy us, that means something. Matthew stood up abruptly from his chair, rounded the table, and knelt beside me. He took my hands in his. Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I was the worst son in the world. But I swear to you, I swear by Dad's memory, that I am going to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. And I'm going to make sure Vanessa can never do this to anyone else again. I hugged him, feeling his body tremble against mine. Richard and Stephen approached too, forming a protective circle around me, like when they were children, and protected me from the storms that scared them. Then this is what we are going to do, I said when we finally separated. Tomorrow we all go to Mr. Harrison. We are going to file a countersuit against Vanessa for marriage fraud, attempted extortion, and defamation. We are going to contact Felicity to testify, and we are going to look for Mr. Malone to see if he wants to talk too. And if she fulfills her threats? Stephen asked. If she goes to the media with her lies? I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Then we show the world who she really is, with proof, with testimonies, with that diary where she herself confesses every manipulation. What we didn't know was that Vanessa had already taken the next step. And when I found out what she did, I knew the battle was far from over. Tuesday morning, the four of us arrived at Mr. Harrison's office as a united front. My three sons walked by my side in formal suits and serious expressions. They were no longer the manipulated and divided men of a week ago. They were my sons again, the Vances facing whatever came next together. The lawyer received us in his largest conference room, with his full legal team, 3 associates, and an intern taking notes on her laptop. On the oak table were organized copies of all the material Felicity had provided us. Mrs. Vance, gentlemen, Harrison began, adjusting his glasses. I have exhaustively reviewed the documentation. We have a solid case, but I need you to understand the implications before proceeding. Explain, I said, taking the seat at the head. Vanessa Sterling filed her divorce lawsuit yesterday afternoon. She is asking for spousal support of $5,000 a month for 5 years, half the value of the apartment where they lived, and an indemnification of $500,000 for emotional damages. Matthew let out a bitter laugh. Emotional damages. She talks about emotional damages? Her argument is that the Vance family subjected her to psychological abuse, that she was isolated from her friends, and that Mrs. Eleanor exercised coercive control over her marriage. Harrison looked at us with a serious expression. She has an aggressive lawyer. I recognize the name Gustavo Inclán. He specializes in media cases where he paints his clients as victims of powerful families. Meaning she's going to use the media, Richard observed. She already is. The intern turned her laptop to show us. On the screen was a video of Vanessa filmed in what appeared to be a modest apartment, dressed in simple clothes, without makeup, eyes teary. This video has 200,000 views since yesterday, she said. I pressed play. Vanessa's voice came out soft, broken, perfectly calculated. I married the love of my life. I thought I had found a family. But what I found was control, manipulation, and rejection. My mother-in-law never accepted me. From day one, she made it clear I wasn't good enough for her son. She excluded me from family decisions, humiliated me in front of others, and when I tried to defend myself, she threatened to take everything away from my husband if he didn't divorce me. I felt the rage rising in my throat like bile. Today, I begin my legal process, not for money, but for justice. For all the daughters-in-law who are treated like intruders in families that should welcome them with love. For all the young women who marry men from powerful families only to discover that the real marriage is with the controlling mother-in-law. The video ended with Vanessa wiping her tears and looking directly at the camera with an expression of wounded dignity. She's good, Stephen admitted, with disgust. Very good. If I didn't know the truth, I'd believe her. The comments are worse, added the intern, scrolling. All mothers-in-law are the same. Rich families think they can buy people. Poor woman, I hope she gets justice. She has thousands of messages of support. Harrison cleared his throat. This is what I warned you about. Vanessa is constructing a public narrative where she is the victim. If we proceed with the countersuit, this is going to get media heavy. They are going to scrutinize your lives, look for anything to back her version. But we have the truth, Matthew said firmly. We have the diary, the testimonies, the proof of the attempted theft. Yes. And that will eventually win in court. But in the court of public opinion, the truth isn't always enough. People tend to believe whoever cries the loudest. I stood up and walked to the window. Below, the city bustled with life, cars, people, businesses. All those people with their own stories, their own dramas, and now mine was about to become public entertainment. Mr. Harrison, I said without turning around, what happens if we present everything publicly? Not in a lawsuit yet, but as preemptive evidence. We upload the content of the diary, Felicity's testimonies, everything. A tense silence fell behind me. It would be risky, the lawyer finally responded. It could be seen as a defamation campaign on our part, or it could be seen as the truth coming to light before the lies take root. I turned to face them. Vanessa has 200,000 views in one day. Every hour that passes, more people believe her. Every comment of support she receives reinforces her narrative. We cannot wait for a judge to pass sentence in 6 months. By then, my reputation, my family's, my company's, will be destroyed. Richard nodded slowly. Mom is right. This isn't just a legal battle, it's an information battle. But it has to be done right, Stephen intervened. We can't seem vindictive or ruthless. We have to present the facts so that people draw their own conclusions. My mind was working at full speed, assembling a strategy like I did when negotiating difficult contracts with complicated suppliers. We need Felicity, I said, her testimony on video telling what her father lived through. We need certified copies of Vanessa's diary with a handwriting expert's translation confirming it's her writing. And we need the records of the attempted bank transfer from my company. I can contact Mr. Malone, Matthew offered. If he is willing to talk, his testimony would also help. Harrison took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly, a gesture he made when processing complex information. If we are going to do this, we need to do it perfectly legally. No anonymous leaks or dirty games. Everything official, everything documented, everything verifiable. How much time do you need to prepare it? I asked. 3 days. I need Felicity to come give her statement before a notary. I need to certify every document, and I need to prepare a press release that presents the facts without crossing the line into defamation. Do it. My voice sounded firmer than I felt inside. And in the meantime, I want you to prepare the most aggressive countersuit you legally can. Marriage fraud, attempted extortion, defamation, perjury, whatever applies. Mom, Matthew said softly. Are you sure about this? Once we start, there is no turning back. I looked at him and his brothers and saw in their eyes something I hadn't seen in months. Respect, solidarity, family. I am sure because this is no longer just about me or about you. It's about Felicity, who had to see her father in intensive care. It's about Mr. Malone, who lost his company because of her. It's about everyone who comes after if we don't stop her now. Richard stood up. Then let's do it. As a family, united. Stephen got up too, followed by Matthew. The three rounded the table and formed a circle with me in the center. The Vances don't surrender, Stephen said, repeating the phrase Robert always said when we faced problems. The Vances don't surrender, we all repeated in unison. We left that office with a plan of action and an iron determination. But as we walked toward the parking lot, my phone vibrated with a notification. It was an anonymous message, no identifiable number. I thought you were smarter, Eleanor. Now you're going to discover what happens when you mess with someone who has nothing to lose. The message included a photograph. It was of my house, taken that very morning, with a red circle marking my bedroom window. My hands started to shake. Matthew saw my expression and took the phone from me. What is it? Oh my God. He showed the image to his brothers. She's threatening us. She knows where Mom lives. We're going back to Harrison, Richard ordered. Right now. This is stalking and threats. We need an immediate restraining order." But as we returned to the building, a cold certainty settled in my chest. Vanessa had crossed a line. She was no longer just a con artist looking for money. She was someone dangerous, desperate, capable of anything. And I had just discovered how far she was willing to go to protect her secret. The restraining order was issued in 48 hours. Vanessa couldn't get within 500 yards of me, my sons, or my company. I installed security cameras in every corner of my house and hired private security. My sons took turns staying with me at night, as if I were a fragile old woman who needed protection. I let them do it because I knew they needed to feel useful, to redeem themselves somehow. Felicity arrived on Thursday, and we recorded her testimony in Harrison's office. She cried, recalling finding her father unconscious on the bathroom floor, describing the months of psychiatric therapy, the nights he woke up screaming because he dreamed Vanessa was fulfilling her threats. The video was 22 minutes long and devastating in its raw honesty. Mr. Malone, to my surprise, also agreed to speak. He traveled from Chicago, a 6'5" man with gray hair and hands that shook slightly when he held the documents, proving how Vanessa had leaked confidential information from his company. He had lost 3 major contracts, he had to fire 40 employees, and his reputation in the construction industry never fully recovered. "I thought it was love," he said in front of the camera, his voice loaded with shame. "She made me feel young again, important, desired. And I, like a vain idiot, gave her access to everything. My accounts, my contracts, my life. When I realized the mistake, it was already too late." Friday morning, Mr. Harrison organized a press conference not in a fancy hotel or with a huge media display, but in my company's conference room, with 6 carefully selected reporters from respectable outlets. I sat in the center, flanked by my 3 sons. To my left was Felicity, to my right, Mr. Harrison, with a thick folder of certified documents. "Thank you for coming," I began, looking directly at the cameras. "My name is Eleanor Vance. A week ago, a woman named Vanessa Sterling published a video accusing me of being an abusive mother-in-law who destroyed her marriage to my son. Today, I am here to present the truth. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't act dramatically. I simply spoke with the calm of someone who has all the evidence on their side. Vanessa Sterling is a professional con artist. She has been married 3 times to successful men older than her. In each marriage, she executed the same pattern: rapid seduction, isolation from the family, psychological manipulation, and finally, financial extortion, backed by false legal threats. Harrison began distributing copies of the documents among the journalists while I continued. "I have here Miss Sterling's personal diary, where she herself documents her manipulation strategies. I have testimonies from her previous victims. I have proof of an attempted theft of $20,000 from my company, and I have evidence of direct threats toward myself and my family." A reporter raised his hand. "Mrs. Vance, why didn't you present this in a private lawsuit? Why make it public?" Because while this was being resolved in courts, Vanessa Sterling was going to keep constructing a false narrative that would not only damage my reputation, but allow her to continue looking for new victims. This is not revenge, it is preemptive protection. Felicity took the microphone with trembling hands. "My father, Dr. Frederick Ames, tried to take his own life because of this woman. She threatened him with false accusations of sexual abuse that would have destroyed his medical career. He preferred to die rather than face those lies. I found him in time, but there are families who might not be so lucky." Her voice broke at the end, but she continued. "If my testimony can prevent another family from going through what we went through, then it is worth reliving that pain." The conference lasted an hour. The journalists asked questions, reviewed documents, photographed pages of the diary. Matthew gave his testimony explaining how Vanessa had manipulated him to distance himself from his family. Mr. Malone participated via video call, describing how he lost his company. By noon, the video of our conference had 500,000 views. By the afternoon, all major media outlets had covered it. And by nightfall, Vanessa's original video had been deleted from all her social networks. But she didn't stay quiet. At 11 p.m., she published a furious response, full of capital letters and exclamation points, accusing us of conspiring to destroy her, of falsifying evidence, of being a powerful family crushing a vulnerable woman. The comments on her post were brutal. There was no support anymore, only people citing the proofs we had presented, calling her a scammer, liar, predator. Her victim narrative had crumbled in a matter of hours. 2 days later, her lawyer, Gustavo Inclán, resigned from the case publicly, saying he had been deceived by his client. Vanessa was left without legal representation and with a reputation torn to shreds. The divorce hearing was quick and devastating for her. The judge reviewed all the evidence, heard the testimonies, and ruled that not only would she not receive alimony or indemnification, but she had to return gifts and assets she had acquired fraudulently during the marriage. The apartment remained completely in Matthew's name. She left the court crying. But this time, no one believed the tears. 3 weeks later, the district attorney initiated a formal investigation for fraud, not just for the attempted theft from my company, but for the false accusations in her previous marriages. Felicity and Mr. Malone testified. The evidence was overwhelming. Vanessa tried to flee to the Cayman Islands, where she had her secret account, but authorities stopped her at the airport with a travel ban. The investigation continued, and she faced years of legal process. A month after all this, I organized a family dinner at my house. A real dinner, not an emergency meeting or a legal strategy session, just family. Grace, Stephen's wife, arrived with a tray of lasagna and tears of apology in her eyes. Diane, Richard's wife, brought everyone's favorite dessert, chocolate lava cake. My grandkids ran down the hallway again, filling the house with the noise I had missed so much. We all sat around the dining table, squeezed but happy. I looked at every face, my sons, their wives, my 5 grandchildren looking at me with those eyes full of unconditional love that only children can have. "I want to say something," I announced, tapping my wine glass with a knife to call for attention. "These last few months were the hardest since I lost your grandfather, Robert. I felt betrayed, alone, excluded from the family I built with my own hands." I saw Matthew lower his gaze, Richard clench his jaw. But I also learned something important. I learned that family love doesn't mean never making mistakes. It means having the courage to recognize errors and the commitment to fix them. I was also wrong, waiting too long to confront the problem. I took an envelope out of my pocket. This is the will I modified a month ago, the one that left everything to a foundation. I held it up so everyone could see it. Today, I destroyed it. I lit a candle in the center of the table and brought the corner of the document to the flame. The paper burned slowly while everyone watched in silence. I made a new one that reflects what I really want, that this family continues united, strong, taking care of each other. The company will be divided equally among my 3 sons. The properties will be distributed fairly. And yes, there will be a foundation with Robert's name, because that dream is still important. Tears ran freely down my son's cheeks now. "But this comes with conditions," I continued, voice firm. "Mandatory family gatherings every Sunday, honest communication always, and never, ever again exclude a member of this family based on gossip or manipulations from third parties. Understood?" "Understood," everyone responded in unison, voices broken but firm. Matthew got up and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Then Richard, then Stephen. Soon we were all in a group hug, crying and laughing at the same time. That night, after everyone left, I stayed alone cleaning the kitchen. I found an old photograph stuck with a magnet on the refrigerator. Robert and me, on our 20th anniversary, smiling under a starry sky in Martha's Vineyard. "We did it, love," I whispered to the photograph. "Our family is okay. It's complete again." And for the first time in months, I slept through the night without nightmares. Because true wealth was never in my properties or my company. It was always at that table full of voices, laughter, and love. And now I knew it with a certainty no one could ever take from me. If this story touched your heart, if you recognized in Eleanor the strength of your own mother or grandmother, leave me a comment telling me where you are watching from. Like if you believe family respect is non-negotiable, and subscribe to follow along for more stories of dignity, courage, and true love. Because we all deserve families that value us, not exclude us.